The idea of the Rebbe to learn every day in the maybe in the Mitzori Milches Abchira. We have the honor today to have a Choshev in German, a Shliach, a Rov in Beis Mנחem, MTC, this Father's Minyan, Harav Achosid, Harav Mנחem Mendel Mlul will give us some insight into Hilches Beis Abchira. Harav Mlul, bevakasha. Good. We'll learn tonight halacha in Rambam regarding and the famous sikha, the way the Rebbe explained Rambam, a meridic sikha regarding the placement of the orin, the gniza of the orin. So the Rambam says as follows. It's important to mention it's in Perik Dalet, in the 4th chapter of Hilches Beis Abchira. The Rambam writes, Even hoiso bekodesh HaKadoshim. There was a stone, the Even HaShesio was placed in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, b'ma'arovai, in the west side. She'oleho, we're talking about the Kodesh HaKadoshim, she'oleho oyo ha'ori munach, that the orin was placed on that stone. Ulefonov, in front of that, you had Tzinsenes Hamon, Umata Aron. Whenever Shlomo built the Beis HaMikdash, v'yodash es soifer l'chorif, and he knew that it would eventually be destroyed. Bono b'y mokim lignois b'y ha'orin l'mato, v'matmoinies amukes v'akalkalos. He has built under tunnels that were deep and not straight to hide it. V'yoshiyahu amelech tziva, so Shlomo amelech by the building of the Beis HaMikdash. Later, a few years before Churban HaBayis, what happened? Yoshiyahu HaMelech, that was the king before, a few years before Churban HaBayis. Tziva hu gnozei v'mokim shebano Shlomo. He requested, he gave an instruction, Tziva. And as a result of that, they hid the Orin in the place that Shlomo has designed years before. Shenemar, like it says in Psukim, in Divrei Hayomim, Vayomer la'levim ha'mevinim ekol Yisrael ha'kadoshim la'Hashem, that he instructed the Koyanim that are teaching Torah to all the Yidden to nues orin ha'kodesh v'bayis ha'shebono Shlomo ben David melech Yisrael. And then it says v'nignas imay, down like in those tunnels are hidden as well mate Aaron v'atzintzenes v'shemen ha'mishcha v'kol elu lechozu v'bayis sheni. And all those did not come back by sheni. V'af urim v'tumim shehoyu b'bayis sheni. Even by Bayis Sheni, the Urim V'Tum that were there were not answering. They were there, but they did not answer questions. And the only function was to be part of the Shemina Begadim, but they weren't. They didn't ask. They didn't get answered through the Urim V'Tumim. So this is Lashon Rambam, and we'll learn as much as we can the Rebbe's Sikha. So Eshton's number 1. The Gemara in Yuma brings the famous Machlekes, what happened to the Orin. We know that the Orin was there by the first Beis HaMikdash. There was one Orin, the Mishkan, by his Rishon. But what happened afterwards? So the Gemara brings in Yuma Daf Nun Gimel 2 opinions. Abelezer says Orin Golo L'Bavel, that the Orin went to Babel, the Orin was exiled, the Orin was taken by those that conquered, and therefore it's in Babel, it's not in Eretz Yisrael. However, there's another 2 opinions that say that no, that the Orin stayed local, he stayed in the Beis HaMikdash. Where is it? Either be Mekoima in its place, which means in Kodesh HaKadoshim, but in a deeper tunnel, or Belishkas Diro Eitzim, in the Lishka, where they would select the wood. And the Gemara has over there an entire story that one time when the Kohanim were inspecting the wood, so they realized that the floor wasn't even. The long story, and they realized that that was the place that would bring to the Orin. That was the opening that would lead to the Orin, as the Hemshech of the Maisa there. So this is an argument the Gemara brings in Yuma regarding the fate of the Orin. Where did it go to? right? Is it Nignas? Did it stay here in the Beis Hamikdash, or is it go to Bavel? Good. The question is, the Rambam, what does the Rambam have to do with this, right? This is l'chura inyan renegir to Divrei Yemei Yisrael, Jewish history. Why is it important for the Rambam to have a say in this, right? Everything that the Rambam addresses has to be something that's negir la'alocha. If he takes a side, because as we just studied the halacha before, the Rambam takes the side that it was nignas, right? That it's hidden in a tunnel under. Why should the Rambam have need to discuss it, to take a side in something that's not relevant, right? So this is the first question. We have many Mefarshim have Yaakov Emden, many Mefarshim have that question. Another question we can have here is that the Rambam goes here very specific regarding who is the person that took the Orin down. So this really originally comes from a Gemara over there in Yuma, Defnun Beis. The Gemara is asking, Mignozoi, who's the one that hid the Orin? Yoshiyahu Gnozoi, right? So it's Yoshiyahu HaMelech that hid the Orin. So why is that so important? I mean, everything the Rambam brings has to be Negeya. So the person that hid it should be completely irrelevant here. Especially, the Rebbe brings up here something interesting, that even though we've mentioned before that it's a machlokes, which means one says Orin Golo LeBovel, that the Orin went away, was exiled, and the other one said that the Orin is b'matmonius in the tunnel, but really, you could say, and many say like this, the Rebbe goes with the Gvuras Ari, the Shagas Ari, the Chidah also mentions that really, the argument, everybody agrees that it was taken to the tunnel. It was hidden. That's clear. That goes according to both opinions. The question is, what happened after that? Did it remain there, or eventually it was found, it was found by the goyim and taken to Bavel? So on that it was Gnozoi, on the Gnozoi part of the story, that everybody agrees, right? So if that's the case, why is it Negeya? Who is it? Yoshiyo or another person? So why is the Rambam going over here in such specific details? Another nekuda here, which is also important, we know, just to mention, you have many examples to this, but the Gemara in Eruvin, just to mention an example, says, the Mishnah that says, Boiskin melach al gabi hakevesh b'shvil shelo yachliku, that we're spreading salt on the kevesh of the Mizbeach so that people shouldn't slip. Why would people slip? After the Rishonim are the different, one of the Rishonim says, since there's a lot of meat, a lot of fat in the kevesh, on the ramp of the Mizbeach, so that's why people would fall. Salt is necessary. I think Rashi, or maybe the Rambam, there's another, that is saying the Pasuk, in times of rain, it can get slippery, right? So that's why there was a constant addition of salt to make sure people wouldn't slip. The Gemara is asking there, Hai melach hechidomi. This salt is adding this layer of salt. How did they do this? If they were mevatel the salt, that the salt should stay there. So you're adding something. You're adding a binyan here, right? In other words, what right do you have? Once you mevatel it, it's part of the structure. If it's part of the structure, it makes a bigger structure. If it makes a bigger structure, uksiv hakel biksav miyad Hashem Allah hizkil, right? That everything, the measurements, everything was dictated by the Eibishter. So we have it's not shaykh, we can't add anything. Even an inch, there's no right, there's no freedom to do such a thing. What will you tell me that a person was mevatel it? If he was mevatel, it's a chatzitza, right? Whoever steps on the kevesh and he goes in something that wasn't nisbatel to the mizbeach is a chatzitza. So whatever the answer is, but one thing we see, the hakol biksav miyad Hashem alai hiskil. One thing that every prat in the Beis Hamikdash come from the Eibishter, and every addition is forbidden. When we read this Rambam superficially, it seems to be that Shlomo took freedom, Kivyochel, and he built in the Beis Hamikdash, hidden places. Why? Strategy. He realized that eventually it's going to be destroyed. So l'chura, right? These are the words. He knew that eventually it would be destroyed. It doesn't say so if that's the case, wow, how could we do such a thing? L'chura, smaller things, as the example we just mentioned, are problematic. So in a way to explain this, the Rebbe goes into the Sedra Aloches of the Rambam, which is also presented as a question. Bechlolos, with the time we have, let's go a little bit quicker. Prokim Beis and Gimel and Beis HaBchira are designated to discuss Tzuras HaKelim, the shape and form of the Kelim. And Perik Dalet, which is the Perik that we just learned, the Halach here, discusses Tzuras HaBinyan u'Midosav, the measurement of the structure of the building, of the Beis HaMikdash, the measurements. So the question is, we're discussing here the Oren and the Gniza. This is Kelim. This is all about Kelim. This is utensil of the Beis HaMikdash. Shulchan, Menorah, Oren. So how did that land here in Halacha Dalet? L'chura, it belongs in Perik Beis, Perik Gimel. So what do we see from here? So Mevur Bezeh, we see something very interesting. That just by the Seder in Rambam, that lays a foundation. The Rambam tells us really how he looks at Oren. Which, that's a tremendous point here, because a lot of right? How do you treat Oren? Is Oren exactly like Klei HaMikdash? Is it different? For example, the Minchas Chinuch over here, I think the Rebbe brings him in the Oren, says that the Oren is exactly like Klei HaMikdash. And exactly like Klei HaMikdash, if you're missing certain Kelim, not according to the Rambam, it's debated, but Bechlolos, it's not Ma'akev the Avodah. So the Oren as well, if there's no Oren, it's not Ma'akev, it's one of the Kelim. So that's one of the Kudas here. The Rebbe takes that Oren is not Klei HaMikdash. As we see, the strongest Raya is the Seder HaDvorim, the way it's laid out, that the Rambam is inserting the halachos of Oren together with Tzuras HaBais. So what do we see from here? That the Rambam teaches us that there's a fundamental difference between Oren and the rest. Oren is part of since the Oren is placed in Kodesh HaKadoshim, so we look at it as the etzem tzuras habayis v'chefta de mikdash. It's considered part of the Beis HaMikdash. The Oren is not a keli, even though we have to answer that many questions, because on the other hand, the Rambam in Hilchos Beis HaBchira in one mitzvah includes binyan Beis HaBchira and the kelim. So that we have to deal with that separately. But b'ofen klali, the Oren, since the Metzias of the Oren is in Kodesh HaKadoshim, so this is a chelek from Etzim, it's part of the Bais, it's part of the Chefza of Mikdash, and therefore the Rambam said this halacha with the halachas of Binyan in Perik Dalet. Now, why would the Rambam use Oren, as we mentioned before, could have been easily considered as keli. It's a keli, right? Why did the Rambam consider? Why did the Rambam make the difference of Oren to the other kelim? So the Rebbe says because the Metzias, what's the Metzias of Beis HaMikdash? The Metzias of Beis HaMikdash is a Bayis LaHashem. But it's a Bayis LaHashem. It's a Bayis for Ashur's V'Izgalus HaShchina. That's Oren. The Rebbe brings here the Ramban, even though in other places the Rambam and the Ramban seem to be, the Rebbe makes a machlokes between the Rambam and the Ramban, but Oifen Kloli, both inyanim are there, and the Rebbe uses this for the Rambam as well, that the Ikra Chayfetz b'Mishkan u'Makim Menuchas HaShchina. What's the entire point of the Mishkan? Shchina, Oren, right? Since Oren is really the purpose of what Mishkan is about, so Oren is Bayis, Oren is not Kelim. Yeah? So therefore, the Oren is not considered like the rest of Klei HaMishkan, but it's part of the Etzem, it's part of Etzem HaMikdash. Now, let's go a little bit quicker. We have a problem with this. That in the Gemara in Yuma it says that there are 5 things that did not appear at the second Beis HaMikdash, and one of them is Oren, the Kapoiris Ukuvim. There was no Oren at the second Beis HaMikdash. Effective the Shaila, if it's really part of the Bayis, and the second Bayis is not able to be complete, so Ibazay, how is that possible that they built a Beis HaMikdash Bayis Sheni that wasn't Sholem in an entire Tzura? So this is really this is exactly the reason why the Rambam brings the concept of Gnizas Oren. When the Rambam brings, the Rebbe goes into the Lashonos. We're not going to have time to go through it, but it's very much negir. It's very Gishmak Esicha to go through inside. The Rebbe goes through word by word that the Halacha is not a story. The Halacha is teaching us that the Oren is there, and the Orin that the Matmoinius that we're talking about, since it doesn't have to be said, it doesn't have to be spelled out, it wasn't made by their personal initiative, it was obviously a nevuah from the Eibishter. And in that case, not only that it was a b'di'evet, but this was also a second Kodesh HaKadoshim, which means the same way that there's a Kodesh HaKadoshim Begolui, in the same way there was also another one in Mokim Agnizo that had to be treated as the same Kedusha. So when it says Bona Bay, he built it, that means he had to build it in the same way, with the same Kedusha that the regular Kodesh HaKadoshim was. So we see from here, and this is why it's Negea to see Yoshiyahu here, because the Rambam gives you the detail that in the same way that it was started in times of Shlomo HaMelech, that Shlomo HaMelech, the entire procedure that had to be done in a way to bring in the Orin into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the same thing had to be done again when Yeshayahu instructed to bring down the Orin in the Matmoinius. It had to be in the same way. The Melech was present, the Kohanim were present, which is that even though it looked as if the Orin was taken away, but the emes, it's we're bringing the Orin Kodesh HaKadoshim, talking not the Kodesh HaKadoshim that we see, but the Kodesh HaKadoshim that's in Matmoinius. So this is how the Rambam continues, that even the Urim V'Tumim, and later when the Rambam continues that even the Urim V'Tumim Shehoyu B'Bayis Hasheni, yes, we ask the question in the same halacha, why is it Negea for the Rambam to bring those two things? Eshtens, the Urim V'Tumim, were not Meshivin B'Ruach HaKodesh. How does that land over here? That's not the halacha that discussed this. So the answer is that in Urim V'Tumim there is a dimin, there is a similarity between the two things, that even though you didn't see it, the Urim V'Tumim weren't nish'olin, they weren't able to answer, they weren't consulted, so to say, but nevertheless they were there, answering Behelim. So the same thing, the Orin was present by Sheni, but it was Behelim as well. And finally, the last nekuda that we have in Loshen HaRambam, why is it important to mention that Tzinsenes Hamon and Mate Arin were there as well? The Rebbe says that this is a confirmation, Take, since these items of Tzinsenes Hamon and Mate Arin had to be the Mokim Ha'orin, so if they would be Matmoinius and that would not be considered Mokim Ha'orin, so there would be Shalai B'Mekayma. They are meant to be Mokim Ha'orin. So from here we have the biggest proof, and this is the Rambam saying it, that this is Taki considered Kodesh HaKadosh.
Shkoyach, I just forgot to mention before the shir, everybody should give Zokah B'Tzibur, so you can do it now. There's pushkes on the table, everybody please give Zokah B'Tzibur. Shkoyach.